Hi everyone, this is Chapter 7, Person-Centered Therapy, Part 2 for Counseling 4500. So now let's talk about the relationship between the therapist and the client. Significant positive personality change does not occur except in a relationship. So what they're saying is, let's say that if you are by yourself and you wanted change in your life, it's going to probably take a lot of work to do that. However, when you are working with another person, that most likely a lot of that can happen because you're bouncing ideas off of each other. So, number one, the two persons are in also a psychological contract. So we have both decided that we're going to work on this, and we'll take it from there, right? If one person feels not so motivated, we can talk about those things. Two, the first person or the client is in a state of incongruence, vulnerable, or anxious. So the client's coming in because there's something going on in their lives that they're not happy with, right? So that's what they're talking about. And then the second person, which is the therapist, is the person who is actually congruent. So hopefully the therapist, you, are someone who is confident in yourself, understands yourself, have resolved most of your problems, and is someone who can model what it feels like to be honest inside and to be able to reach out, to what they want to be on the outside. 4, the therapist experiences unconditional positive regard. So right there, the therapist is giving them a welcomingness, right? This unconditional positive regard is them welcoming and accepting them as a person coming into therapy. 5, the therapist experiences an empathetic understanding of the client's internal frame of reference and communicates this with the client. So when the client is talking, the therapist should be able to understand what's going on through active listening, right? Reflection of emotions and feelings and ideas, paraphrasing. So you're doing all these things because you're letting the client know that you understand where they're coming from. And if there's any confusion or anything like that, the therapist should ask the client to clarify those things. Then 6, the client feels the empathetic understanding and unconditional positive regard. So then now the therapist will be able to demonstrate all these things to the client. The client goes, okay, you're someone that I feel safe with. You're modeling certain things or ideas. You're reflecting how I'm feeling at this moment. So hopefully this will become a really good therapeutic relationship with each other. The therapeutic core conditions that we've heard so far, repeated over and over in this chapter, is congruence, unconditional positive regard and acceptance, and accurate empathetic understanding. And we're actually going to go in right now and define each of these things next in detail. Congruence or genuineness. So the therapist is real. They are genuine, integrated, and authentic during the therapy. So genuine basically means honest, right? Integrated means that they're working with you as a team. And then also they're authentic during the therapy. So when the client is saying something that they don't understand, the therapist doesn't understand, the therapist should clarify those things, right? So they're being authentic. And when they are understanding what the client is saying, they're going to paraphrase, they're going to reflect those emotions that the client is feeling to confirm that they understand where they're coming from or how they're feeling, that their client is feeling anyways. They're without a false front. We heard about the word facade earlier, which is that fancy word for basically kind of like the outside mask of everyone, right? So they should not be someone who's wearing a mask. They should be genuine and honest and open with their client. The outer and the inner experience match. So again, you as therapist, you should match on the inside with the outside. You're not lying or anything like that. Openly expressing feelings, thoughts, reactions, and attitudes that are present with that client. So if there's any issues, like you feel like there's a potential resistance with your client, you want to open up and say, I feel like there's certain things that you said you're doing that you have not done yet, right? And stuff like that, because you are feeling this way. So you are going to confirm those things with your client. You want to also use reflection, and then of course also paraphrasing of emotions and stuff like that as well. All those things are really important to show that your client that you are understanding what's going on. All right, unconditional and positive regard and acceptance. Deep and genuine caring for the client as a person. Your caring is non-possessive and non-judgmental. So when you have a client, you do want to accept them and welcome them in, right? Wherever they came from, let's say their history is a little bit more severe. Let's say something like they've committed crimes and they're not proud of it. but they are coming in today to therapy to make these changes or to get better or whatever it is that they're feeling. So in that sense, you do want to be non-judgmental. It's like, yeah, it's great that you're coming in here because you recognize that you want to be the person that you want to be, right? That, you know, there are certain things that might have happened in the past that you want to clear. We can clear those things up, hopefully, and then, you know, also strive to become who you want to be. That self-actualizing tendency. All right, I'll accept you as you are. Again, the same thing. And then clients are free to their own beliefs and their feelings. Yeah, so they're able to feel how they feel, and you are going to be with them as they process those emotions and their feelings that they are feeling at that moment. Accurate empathetic understanding. One task of the counselor is to understand the client's feelings accurately, moment to moment, in the here and now. So what that means is you're going to have to do active listening. Active listening is not thinking about what to say in response to that person, emptying out your brain and just listening to what they're saying. Listen to their story. See how they're reacting at that moment. What are their feelings? How are they at that moment, right? That's one way to be able to understand the client's feelings in the here and now. Aim is to encourage a client to get closer to themselves and to have them recognize the resolution to their incongruity exists within themselves. So as they talk it out, they probably know how they should have responded, right? But for some reason, one or another reason for survivals or whatever, they have chosen to do it in an unhealthier way. And so this is a time where you're able to allow them to say those things out in a safe space. Empathy is defined as deep and subjective understanding of the client within the client or with the client. So let's say, for example, your client's talking about something that was very upsetting to them, right? Their heartbeat was racing. You know, they had butterflies in their stomach at the same time because they don't know what exactly happened. They're frustrated. They're upset, all that stuff. You, as the therapist, do not have to experience exactly the same things that they have experienced. But think about that time where you also felt something similar, where you were so upset that you could not function, basically, right? All you wanted to do was something very bad or unhealthy. So that's what it's saying right there, is to be able to draw from your own experiences, you know, what you would have done in that sense. You don't have to share this, you know, but you want to be able to say, oh, I understand what you mean when you're saying you're frustrated about this experience. Yeah, it is frustrating. I would be frustrated too, right? Okay, number one, pay attention to and value their experiencing. So again, you want to be respectful and understand where they're coming from at this moment. Two, process their experience both cognitively and bodily. So see how they are reacting in the sense of how they're thinking, but also their nonverbal body language that they're showing you as well. You know, you can see the tenseness in their fist when they're talking about the situation, or they're shaking a lot, or their voice is quivering, or whatever it is. 3, view prior experiences in a new way. So we're going to talk about, hey, let's see it from a different perspective than this, right? This is how you did respond, but what are other ways that people could have responded? 4, increase their confidence in making choices and in pursuing a course of action. So from here, they might say, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to do it this way instead. And you want to be able to go, yeah, I believe that you can do it because you came up with this idea. You knew that there were other options and now you're choosing it. So, you know, it's going to be scary, but, you know, you brought this up and let's try it out and see what happens. What's the worst that can happen at this moment, right? You'll just learn about another alternative. It might work, it might not. We don't know, but let's try it out and see what happens. There are 3 different types of empathy. There's subjective empathy. It enables practitioners to experience what it is like to be that client. So to understand where that person is coming from. Interpersonal empathy pertains to understanding a client's internal frame of reference and conveying a sense of private meaning to that person. So kind of like how they would communicate these ideas and these feelings. So interpersonal oftentimes is about from one to another person, right? So to be able to understand that client's inside motivations. Objective empathy is it relies on knowledge sources outside of a client's frame of reference. So what else is going on in the world, right? And how they see it. So how they see the specific client potentially as well. So are there things that it's subjective, which is much more opinion based, or, their own personal experience versus what is something that's happening in reality wise. How is everyone feeling at this moment? All right, so you want to be able to have accurate empathetic understanding. The therapist will sense clients' feelings as if they were his or her or their own without becoming lost in those feelings. So you can get those feelings that they're talking about, but you don't want to be obsessed with it where that's all you're thinking about as well outside of the workplace experience. All right, therapists can ask clients if they feel the therapist is trying to be empathetic. So maybe the client's doing some resistance type work. So you can ask them like, hey, how is everything? How do you feel about me here and talking about these things? Do you feel like we're connecting? And all that other stuff if you want to, as a person who might be sensing anything that might be a little off or whatever. All right, when it comes to application, therapeutic techniques and procedures, we really want to make sure that you are thinking about the reflection of feeling. Okay, that's really important because they're telling you their story. They're also telling you from an emotional perspective as well, right? They could be screaming, they could be yelling, they could be crying or whatever it is. And you need to be able to understand what that means. There is a mistake that people have on person-centered therapy as just reflection of and parroting of what the client is saying. Parroting or parrots are birds that basically reflect exactly or repeat what you're saying, right? Like, Polly want a cracker. And then it'll say, Polly want a cracker. It's not going to say, I want a cracker, right? Because it's saying exactly what you're saying. So in this one, when you are reflecting your client's statements, you don't want to say exactly the same thing. You want to sum it up and then say, this is, the emotion that you're feeling at this moment because of these reasons, right? So then that allows them to understand what's going on and that you also understand what's going on. And if there's any confusion, they can clear it up then. All right, evolution to person-centered methods, presence. So being completely attentive to and immersed in the client as well as in the client's expressed concern. So really be interested in what they're talking about. Immediacy is addressing what is going on between the client and the therapist at that moment. So these are things that you want to talk about, right? Express these things. So like, we're here together, we're talking, you're saying these things, all those things that are in the here and now. Person-centered therapists have the freedom to use a variety of responses and methods to assist their client. So you can use pretty much a lot of techniques when it comes to this. But as long as you're not directing what's going on or directing what they need to do. The common question oftentimes when you do use different techniques is it appropriate for this specific situation or does it fit? All right, here are a list of different areas where in person-centered therapy is effective. So I'm not going to read all this entire list, but it's pretty much everywhere. All right, applications to crisis intervention. So crisis is when it's like kind of like an emergency, right? So things such as an unwanted pregnancy. And remember, with these things that we're talking about here, as a therapist, you might believe in a certain thing, right? You should not put those values that are your own onto your client. It's also known as value imposition and is considered unethical. Remember, your client knows and should be able to make their own decisions without your influence on exactly how it is, just because you feel a specific way about something. All right, illness, again, learning about maybe you have a disease or disability that might be deadly. So, that could make you rethink your life, right? Disastrous event, maybe it's a natural disaster like a flood or something like that, or a loss of a loved one, so death of a loved one. Allow the people to express themselves, helps ground them, helps to calm in the middle of the turmoil, and then also allows them to think more clearly and make better decisions. So by allowing them to talk all these things out, all their concerns at this moment with you in therapy, that they feel a lot better. They feel a little bit more calm because they're able to share what they've been feeling inside with the outside world. Because during these time periods, people might be worried, but not necessarily know how to help. And so your client might go, yeah, I'm fine right now, when really they aren't fine, right? So as a therapist, you are a person that they can share all of these things, these conflicting experiences and stuff like that they're feeling inside. In some crises, the therapist may need to provide more structure and direction. So that means something like if there's a panic going on, because it is a crisis that we're talking about, right? So because of that, then yeah, you want to be able to tell them, different ways to calm down, different ways to resolve certain things. And then also when you want to hospitalize a student or a client, a client who is suicidal, you might need to tell them things that they need to do so that they're safe. All right, application to group counseling. Facilitator rather than a group leader. So in a group leader, you're kind of like standing outside of everything. When it comes to a facilitator, you're basically engaging in conversation with your clients and making sure that it moves it forward and everything like that. Whereas a group leader might be seen as someone who knows everything or not necessarily at an equal level compared to the facilitator role. All right, create a safe and healing environment. Allow for the honest and meaningful interactions. We often say that group therapy is very much like a microcosm of the real world. Microcosm is just a fancy word for like a smaller version of something. So this means that the 8 people that are in therapy with them is kind of like representing a smaller world that they work in or they live in. So you can see how they respond to different people and stuff like that. But then they are also able to see how they have realized how to resolve their own problems, or, that they know how to solve their problems, but they're trying to reach it and get there. And the clients or each of your clients can see how each person is doing and at their different paces and stuff like that. All right, clients realize that they do not have to face challenges alone because there's other people there who care and support them, hopefully, and cheerlead with them. Avoid making interpretive comments because it could make the group self-conscious and slow down the process. Remember, when it comes to this, we're talking about them knowing what they need to do, right? So you don't need to interpret any of it. You just need to let it, eventually happen. And so you don't want to do this in group because then they're going to go, oh, well, are you going to interpret what I'm also going through? And it's not really about that, is it, when it comes to person-centered therapy? All right, now we're talking about a subset of it, which is our subset of person-centered, which is expressive arts therapy, which is created or popularized by Natalie Rogers, his daughter, Carl Rogers' daughter. Extends a person-centered approach to spontaneous creative expression. So this one is talking about expression, okay? And the reason why is because they recognize that sometimes we don't have the words to describe how we're feeling. Instead, we can express it in different ways, though. So, and these things could be deep and inaccessible feelings that we're talking about in these emotional states, right? So maybe through dance, like movement, drawing, painting, sculpting, music, writing, and improvisation, which is about having, at that moment dialogue, like on the spur dialogue. These things are less focused on words, on how to describe these feelings of guilt, let's say, that they might be feeling. Instead, they can express it out with color, with clay, and all those other materials. So when it comes to the principles of expressive arts therapy, all people have an innate ability to be creative. So you don't have to know how to paint like Leonardo da Vinci or anything like that. We can we can think of ways to resolve a problem that we have, right? That's considered creativity. The creative process is transformative and healing. Personal growth with the higher states of consciousness, self-awareness. Emotions and feelings are channeled into the art to be released. So you are using this canvas, to express how you're feeling. And then from there, the therapist and you can even talk about those things. And maybe that will help you find the right wording to describe what's going on then. If not, maybe you can hear from the therapist their words, and maybe that will also help you understand how to express these things that are inside of you. Another section that's known in person-centered therapy is motivational interviewing, also known as MI. So motivational interviewing sounds like you're trying to motivate someone through an interview, right? It's not necessarily with that. It's really about talking to someone so that they understand what's going on or making that realization, okay? So let's go into it and I'll describe what I'm talking about. Humanistic, client-centered, psychosocial directive counseling approach. So again, it's based off of Carl Rogers in that sense of, let's hear what the client is going to say. Effective as a brief intervention, so it's short term. Typically, it's considered something that you would do before you go into and work on the problems. And then directive for eliciting behavior change by helping clients to explore and resolve ambivalence. Ambivalence is kind of a fancy word for kind of like not caring, not knowing, and maybe not being aware of what's going on. So someone might say something like, where do you want to eat today? And they're like, I don't know. I don't care, right? So in that sense, there's no passion behind what's going on or not caring about what's going on. And sometimes when it comes to, let's say, addiction, we don't necessarily think that we have an addiction, right? And then we'll say things like, oh, yeah, I can stop anytime I want, or I don't have a problem. I don't think I have a problem, when really they do, right? And probably when you ask someone, where do you want to eat? And then you suggest something like, a restaurant that focuses on bugs or something like that. You're like, oh, I don't want to eat that. Yeah, stop being so ambivalent. Just talk about a couple things that you might want to do instead. So anyways, MI was initially used for alcoholism or addiction, and then also substance abuse, compulsive gambling, eating disorders, anxiety disorders, depression, suicidality, chronic disease management, and also health behavior change practices. So as you can see, it started off with addiction, but then it has spread out to many, many other things. And you can see this also being applied to different frameworks as well. It stresses self-responsibility and promotes invitational style for working cooperatively with clients to generate alternative solutions to behavioral problems. So that's a fancy way of just saying, we're trying to resolve a problem that you have, but you might not realize that you have it, although everyone else around you sees it. For example, you don't think that you have a drinking problem, but you did get a DUI, right? Most of the time when people are responsible, they don't have an addiction. Obviously this is a more it requires more of a conversation, but let's just talk in general in the sense, like, if you hit a car, if you got into a car accident, you got a DUI, those are a bunch of things that kind of gives you a specific idea of what's going on, right? But you as that person might not realize it or in denial about it. So you're ambivalent about what's going on. So what you do when it comes to MI is based on open-ended questions. You're going to ask questions that are not very accusatory. Tell me what's going on. How many drinks do you think is normal for a day, right? And then let them talk it all out. Because as they talk it all out, they're like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe I do have a drinking problem. And that's like the start of it, that realization. So the ambivalence is no longer there. It's starting to be a little bit more clearer. Okay, so that means that it requires you as a therapist to employ reflective listening. You really do need to think and then listen actively and then reflect what they're saying by paraphrasing what they're saying. Affirming and supporting the client, responding to resistance in a non-confrontational manner. So maybe there are things that they are not ready to talk about, right? But you don't want to say, so I noticed that you're avoiding this. No, instead you want to say something else that is a lot more supportive, right? Like, it sounds like you're talking about these things, but what's the next step, right? Something like that, potentially, that will be able to help them say what they need to say. All right, guiding a discussion of ambivalence. So again, if they're hesitant, right, to be able to talk to them in a way where they're willing to open up and talk a little bit more about it. Summarizing and linking at the end of the session, and then eliciting and reinforcing change talk. So maybe at the end, they realize what's going on, and then maybe they also talked a little bit about the starting of change. And so you want to mention those things because they came up with those things, right? And you want to remind them that they are the ones who thought about these things. So it's starting to match up with what's going on, and so then they can hopefully be able to work on these problems. All right, the basic principles of motivational interviewing. Number 1, therapist practicing MI strives to experience the world from the client's perspective without judgment and criticism. See, again, very person-centered, right? 2, MI is designed to evoke and explore both discrepancies and ambivalence. So it's talking about also whenever things don't make sense when your client's talking to you, right? And then also when the client is avoiding answering something. So those are 2 things that we want them to start to really answer or talk about, even though they're hesitant to do it. You want to listen for arguments for change and not to change, although the therapist steers it towards change. So they're going to say, well, I'm kind of happy the way I am now, but I guess I could improve my relationship with my family if I stopped drinking, right? So you hear both of those things, and you all definitely want to make sure that you're gearing it towards more change, right? Because otherwise, then why are they in therapy? If they're gonna behave the same way, why are they here? So that's something that you can also emphasize. Something like, you came here because you recognize there's something going on, and you want to work on it. So maybe we should work on it. And this is what I'm hearing that you're saying when you say these things about drinking and stuff like that. All right, 3, reluctance to change is viewed as normal and expected part of the therapeutic process. So obviously, change is really scary. Okay, so people are going to be reluctant to do it. People are going to be hesitant to do it. And you are the person who is going to be there to give them that safe space so that they can try out those changes because they've been so resistant to it before. 4, practitioners operating from the MI orientation support clients' self-efficacy. So that means that we're supporting the fact that they believe that they can do it. Encourage them to use their own resources to make necessary actions that can lead to success in changing. So again, we also tell them that we believe that you have the tools to solve your problems. You just might not realize it yet, right? So these are things that they are starting to realize on their own. Focuses on present and future conditions and empowers clients to find ways to achieve their goals. So again, you are going to encourage them by saying, oh yeah, I see how you brought up these things. Sounds like you have those tools to use. Let's just figure out how to use them, right? Okay, 5, when clients show signs of readiness to change through decreased resistance to change and increased talk about change, focus on the strengthenings of clients' commitment to change and helping them implement a change plan. So that's a lot put in together right there. But basically what that's saying is once your client is aware of what's going on, we need to work on how they're going to achieve those changes and then to maintain those changes as they're going through therapy. That's what it is. All right, in here also you'll see 2 links. The second link is called Addictions. In that one is role-playing of a therapist and a client with addiction. And it's really great because as she's talking through with the client, she also explains why she's saying the things that she's saying and how the client is responding to those things. All right. If you want to really break down MI, these are the 5 stages of change in their model. Number 1 is pre-contemplation stage. So that is when you're not even thinking of anything yet because contemplation means to think, right? So this is before you're even aware that you have a problem. Okay, this is where we all are, right? At the beginning, if we realize that we don't realize that there's a problem until we realize that there's a problem, right? So that would be the contemplation stage. Let's say when it turns in terms of addiction, you got a DUI. Now people are going to talk to you about those things potentially, or you are embarrassed by it or upset about it or ashamed about it. And so you're like, oh no, do I have a addiction? I don't know, maybe. And then you might then start to seek therapy, right? Or maybe seek out something to address what's going on. And then you go into the preparation stage. So you now have decided to go to therapy, or maybe you're mandated to go to therapy, which is being forced to go to therapy. Otherwise, you would, let's say, go to jail or get kicked out of something. You're starting to talk about your problems, okay? 4th is once you're finished talking about it, now you're going to actually do some changes in your life. That's the action stage, right? So this is a time period where we're going to create a treatment plan and we're going to work on it, right? In between preparation and action. And as you're doing these things, we want to make sure that you continue doing these things because they're healthier for you, right? You've decided this is healthy for you as a client, so you're going to keep on doing it. And that's the maintenance stage, basically. So after therapy is done, whenever something does happen again, they know how to maintain these healthy decision making, even if it might not be the funnest or whatever it is, but they realize, oh yeah, this is what I need to do to maintain who I am as a person in a good, healthy way. When it comes to person-centered therapy from a multicultural perspective, the strengths are they promote cross-cultural communication, racial and political tension reduction. So again, these are things from each person's perspective, right? And how they can solve it. So if they talk to each other about it, they can understand where each person's coming from. Core conditions useful in the worldviews, again, that's very similar to what we just said, does not assume the role of expert who is going to impose a right way of being on the client. So remember, as a person-centered, the client is the center, right? And so we're not putting our own values onto our clients. We want to hear what their values are from their inside and be able to make the decisions on change based on those things about themselves. A fellow explorer, I always kind of describe therapy as the client is the driver and you are in the passenger seat, right? And the client will maybe like they're going to be so distracted that they miss their exit, but it's okay because they can get off the next exit and then come back. They can reroute, right? And so we'll know that we're going to get somewhere. We're going to get to where they want to be, but there might be exits and stuff like that, and that's okay. There might be traffic, and that's okay. But let's get on this journey together, because every person's journey is going to be different. Motivational interviewing is effective on gender, age, ethnicity, and sexual orientation. Shortcomings is that many people who come to community mental health clinics want more structure than this approach provides. So when people go into person-centered therapy, they're like, what? You're telling me that I know how to solve my own self? I'm paying you to solve my own problems? That doesn't make sense. So for some people, they might not like that. They want to be much more directed. All right, difficult to translate the core therapeutic conditions into actual practice in some cultures. Again, like believing in yourself is kind of weird for some people. They don't understand what that means. They don't also understand acceptance and non-judgmental and stuff like that. So they're like, oh yeah, well, I am a bad person or whatever. No, we still want to welcome you as a person in a safe space. All right, focuses on the values of internal locus of evaluation. So remember, talking about internal locus means inside of you. You are the one who can do things if you wanted to. It's not an external locus of evaluation. It's an internal. How do you judge yourself on the inside? Collectivist cultures are highly influenced by societal expectations. So that means is for collectivist ones, they're talking about like a family, right? So your feelings are not necessarily as important as the collective whole. So in this sense, it might be then a challenge because you are trying to be honest with yourself, and it might disagree with the collective whole. Okay. All right. This is the end of this chapter. Bye.